Uh, Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 81 of STA Open Call. I'm your host, Jim Toes, President and CEO of the Security Traders Association, better known as STA. STA Open Call is brought to you by the STA Foundation, a 501c3 corporation which serves as STA's educational arm. Anything said on this call should not be considered investment or legal advice. Our only intention here is to provide education. Okay. Today's episode, the topic is going to be on FINRA's efforts and emphasis on cybersecurity and fraud prevention. FINRA is a self-regulatory organization that plays a pivotal role in investor protection, regulates more than 3,400 member firms and 600,000 registered individuals. And obviously, focusing on preventing and addressing fraud is one of its primary functions, which it does through a multifaceted approach here. Now, today's presenter is Greg Ruppert. He is Executive Vice President and Chief Regulatory Operations Officer at FINRA. Regulatory Operations organization is a newly created unified team of programs at FINRA. Greg is here today to tell us more about it, his role, and how it fits into FINRA's emphasis on cybersecurity and fraud prevention. We will also be touching on FINRA's 2026 Annual Regulatory Oversight Report and its FINRA Forward initiative as the backdrop and material for most of today's call. Now, before we do all this, we just really think in this particular call, it's really important to kind of provide, a background and a bio on Greg here. Now, Greg joined FINRA in 2020. Prior to that, he was Senior Vice President in Charles Schwab's Corporation Risk Management from 2014 to 2020. And in that role, he led teams responsible for several key operational and compliance risk areas across the enterprise. And prior to joining Schwab, Greg spent more than 17 years with the U.S. government, achieving the rank of Senior Executive Service. Greg's career as a special agent in the FBI included investigator and leadership roles specializing in complex corporate and security cases, financial crimes, terrorism, and cyber. So he has just under 30 years of experience in this area. He's seen it all from the Nigerian print scams that were popular in the late 90s to obviously more advanced schemes that we're seeing today that involve AI. So, Greg, I want to thank you for coming on and spending time with STA and its listeners today to talk about this. Obviously, it's a very important topic.
Great. Thank you, Jim, for having us and having FINRA be able to be part of your show today.
Great. All right. So, well, why don't we start with the Regulatory Operations Organization? What is it? What are its goals, and how does it fit into FINRA's overall structure?
Yeah, so great question. And starting off at the top, it fits squarely in FINRA's mission, which is to safeguard the integrity of the world's largest capital market. It's also responsible for protecting everyday Americans so they can invest in confidence, and also to support the market vibrancy and capital formation so businesses can feel dynamic and growing U.S. economy. So within that, as you kind of noted, we are a self-regulatory organization, which positions us in a unique intersection between government regulatory functions as well as our member firms that are the group of firms that provide the broker-dealer expertise and ability for people to invest in our markets. So what really with regulatory operations, we're bringing together our core regulatory program. So that is what a lot of your listeners will know as the member supervision function, which ranges everything from the membership application process to risk monitoring, exams, as well as a large group of investigative areas, the National Cause of Financial Crimes Group, and some of our intelligence functions. Another group that it brings into the fold now is market oversight, which was formerly known as market regulation. And that is primarily comprised of our surveillance operations that conduct cross-market surveillance, but also individual surveillances as part of our contracts with various exchanges. And then we have our enforcement team that takes enforcement actions as a result of referrals from the previous two areas and anywhere in between. So as part of that, as the Chief Regulatory Operations Officer, I report directly to FINRA's CEO, Robert Cook. And really what we're set up to do is support a more effective collaboration across our regulatory programs, provide more coordinated regulatory relationships and interactions with our member firms, and then to expand the intelligence across all of our departments as we bring more integrated processes and technologies to bear.
Has there been any feedback from member firms yet, or any when you kind of talk to them about the new organization? Are you getting what types of questions are you getting, and or any type of initial feedback from member firms?
Yeah, we obviously talk a lot to our member firms, and we believe foundationally as an SRO, the S in the SRO is really that self-regulatory aspect of being connected and leveraging those relationships. I'd say firms are usually not shy and not quiet about where we can improve, but at the same time, we've been asking them as part of our FINRA Forward initiative is where do you need to see more from us, ranging from modernizing our rule book, but also more intelligence, more information for compliance and risk officers to reduce the compliance expense and burdens, and then also what tools and as you talked about at the top of the call, are really around fraud and cyber. So we've been hearing those requests and part of our FINRA Forward initiative, and this particular unification of the groups is coming from a lot of our member firm comments and requests. I'll say just going back to my days at a member firm,
Yeah, yeah,
we would often see like there's not just one FINRA. There could be potentially multiple FINRAs, and that's taxing on firms. There's limited resources, limited bandwidth, and then kind of how do you prioritize multiple FINRA requests coming in? So those have been some of the things we've been hearing and things that we're looking to address in having a unified regulatory operations so that we are, as a collective group, interfacing with firms. And so hopefully reducing the number of either touch points or data requests. And we've seen some wins in the data reduction requests over the past year or so, and how do we then further expand upon that, leveraging the intelligence or information or data, whatever you want to call it, that exists across multiple FINRA teams and pulling that into a cohesive collection capability and use capability so that we're not kind of overlapping our engagement with firms. So those are some of the things that
yeah.
we've heard from firms, and we've heard obviously the request for more intelligence and leveraging of our expertise earlier in the process so that we can allow them to respond before something goes wrong, before having to be reactionary. So we have a unique vantage point across the industry in what we're able to do and unique relationships that we're able to capitalize on. So we think we're going to be able to leverage all of that expertise across FINRA to deliver in those areas.
That's great. No, that's a good segue. I mean, and I guess I do want to go back. I know I really did want to emphasize like your background and the time that you spent at Schwab, and just having insights into some of into not just like I know you talked about like the how they get inundated by is not it's not just FINRA, it's other regulatory SROs and other regulatory agencies. But I mean, okay, that's great that you have that there's a sensitivity to that. But there's also, yeah, obviously you learn there as far as what Schwab's capable of doing, like what the industry is capable of doing, and what is a reasonable request. As as far as what is reasonable and what is good, because sometimes I feel like when I deal with regulators who have no experience on the people that they're regulating, they're almost hesitant to maybe ask or make a requirement or make a because they don't know if the broker dealer is able to even to respond to it. So, why don't we pivot to like obviously the main topic here, which is you know FINRA recently published a 2026 Annual Regulatory Oversight Report, which by the way was excellent. I liked the colors, liked all the boxes, a lot of good helpful links on it. It was very easy to read. And among other things, obviously, was the progress that FINRA Forward, which is a relatively new initiative at FINRA. I think it was in the spring of this year. and its emphasis on cybersecurity threats. So, Robert Cook did speak at our October conference in Washington, D.C., and he talked about the three broad categories. I think he referred to them as pillars of FINRA Forward. The first pillar, modernizing oversight, reviewing, updating, within FINRA. The rule set, empowering compliance, which I do think you touched on, and then supporting resilience obviously was the third pillar that will probably everything we're going to probably talk about from here on kind of falls under that pillar. But it's really expanding, FINRA's cybersecurity and fraud prevention. This is going to be a very broad question here, but where are we on this? Like, what is the current landscape? I mean, I know I kind of made a joke about the Nigerian prince earlier in the call here, but where are we on financial fraud? What types of new trends are you seeing? Tactics, volumes, and maybe start at a high level and just provide some color there.
Sure. Again, your question, it covers the gamut. So
Yeah.
I'll break it down in a couple of these areas and infuse in kind of what I'm hearing from our firms, but also what we're also hearing from other experts outside of the securities industry, but where we can learn from in the larger uh, aspects of cyber-enabled fraud and fraud activity, because it has evolved over the years. And as you noted, in 2025, really we started focusing on FINRA Forward, and it had key tenets that Robert's laid out that we've been working on over the years. And I thought the FINRA Forward was a perfect culmination of giving it a heightened focus of where we can start to exercise as well as show our unique ability as a self-regulatory organization, what we can do. So as part of FINRA Forward, as you noted in one of the third pillars, we're going to be expanding our cybersecurity and fraud prevention tools and intelligence. Um, we really started focusing on how we could transform this perspective, our unique perspective of what we know, what we're able to collect into practical tools that firms can use to protect themselves and their clients in emerging threats. So to your earlier point, my background coming from a member firm, the one of the things that I think is very core to what we're trying to focus on is how do we empower firms sooner and leverage them as a force multiplier in this fight against third party or threat actors that are attacking firms, attacking investors, attacking markets, sometimes internal to the U.S., but sometimes externally and globally. And where can we be aligned in terms of our intelligence capabilities of providing that information to our member firms versus solely focused on our regulatory oversight responsibilities at looking at where firms might have compliance issues or fraud issues internally. I think we've seen that threat evolve throughout the last decade or so, where there's less kind of attacks that you and I saw back decades ago that were solely coming from inside the industry. So when we think about the boiler rooms or the bucket shops filled with registered representatives to today, where we're seeing those types of boiler room activities occurring outside of the U.S. in non-registered venues that are attacking investors directly and then steering them or guiding them into self-directed firms or other accounts and or doing account takeovers, which means they just steal the logon credentials of individual investors and pretend to be them and move quicker than detection capabilities are currently set up to do. So watching that evolving landscape has been key for us in terms of positioning ourselves to how to assist member firms. And I think when you read the 2026 oversight report, and we've seen some external law firms make some comments related to this shift in tone that we have of where we're able to provide that tactical or operational intelligence that is actionable for firms to respond to the ongoing threats that we're seeing. So that's one that in part of the multi-part question that you asked. But we've clearly heard firms loud and clear that they need more information in the hands of compliance, risk, supervision, and other professionals, including cyber, so that they can prepare for the new year. So we actually released this report in December, um, which is a first for us, and so that's part of again listening to firms so that they can plan their 2026 in advance related to how we're seeing this space. Um, just briefly want to touch quickly on your question about the current landscape. As I noted, we're definitely seeing a shift, and the third party landscape is making it even more complex. So that's vendor risk that comes on top of everything that we're looking, and then you combine AI and generative AI on top of all of that, which would include vendors using AI, firms using AI, but the bad guys using AI as well. We see vulnerabilities consistent with what we've been reporting on to data systems that not just vendors but individual threat actors can take control of. So that's all of your ransomware,
Yeah.
sophisticated ability, and then um, just tying back into what I was saying earlier is going directly against investors. And so the investment club uh, type frauds that we're seeing, which is inducing investors and individuals who are not yet investors to become investors and impersonating officials of member firms, impersonating financial luminaries, media personalities, pretending to be them and being inside of these chat rooms and luring them in, grooming them to start to invest, and then basically directing them to engage in ramp and dump or pump and dump schemes. So that's the complexity of the environment that we're in, and one of the things that we really need to focus on, I think, is shifting how we approach it. And since the pandemic, we've definitely seen an increase in the fraud and cyber-related fraud activities. We have more fronts that we have to deal with than ever before. So, we can't just sit back and assume that we could tackle each one of these attack vectors or types of scams or typologies or trends individually, but we got to be thinking about it uh, in a new reality. And that new reality is that we don't respond as individual organizations or individual firms, but we have to unify the industry and really develop a coordinated defense. And so, the some of the questions we get is what role does FINRA actually play in this space? And that's where we're launching the Financial Intelligence Fusion Center, or the FIFC for short.
Mhm.
And that's really going to be able to help firms combat bad actors um, through faster intelligence sharing. So, uh, our unique ability to collect and share intelligence out faster in a centralized hub, it brings together our expertise, our intelligence capabilities, our relationship to member firms, which is tapping into their expertise, their intelligence sources, as you noted at the beginning, like what firms can do and what they know is sometimes uniquely deeper than what others know, but bringing that together to share in a collective environment, and then our relationships with external entities, whether it's government, whether it's other entities that we're able to kind of consolidate and coordinate, is what the FIFC is going to be able to offer our member firms against what this new reality in the cyber enabled fraud space is going to be.
When you talk about like other uh entities, like other organizations, like I is this going like traditionally I would if that came up I would say it's great that like government agencies are kind of communicating with each other, but are these other organizations, agencies, are they like are they social media type companies? Are you is it like that, or obviously it kind of ties into this investment club
Yeah.
evolution. I mean, so what other organizations should, are you kind of engaging with in like what types of agreements are in place,
Yeah, so
if
I would,
any? Yeah.
yeah, I would say there's it's we are only limited to our kind of creative ability as well as our relationship making capability, which I think is very we're on solid ground for
Hmm.
an expansion. We have been able to attract new talent from various uh, departments. So if we go back to agencies, you're absolutely correct. So SEC has always been a key interface for FINRA. We also have strong relationships with the FBI and other law enforcement agencies. So there's not only at the federal level, but also at the state level capabilities. State securities regulators is another area, and then getting into some of the, probably the non-traditional um, relationships. So building out within the DHS CISA. So there's cyber
Yeah.
areas that we have those capabilities. We look to partner with other SROs. We look to partner with other nonprofits or NGOs that are in this space. And then to your last kind of point is looking at on a life cycle, what is kind of what's upstream that we could go to. And so in some particular cases, we're seeing uh, larger technology companies like Microsoft. There was opportunities that we had earlier this year to partner with them related to some very specific types of cyber attacks where we were able to leverage what we knew from the threat space, what might be impacting our members, and helping facilitate their civil actions that ultimately went upstream to a foreign government that was able to arrest a cyber actor and take them off the streets. And then we have the opportunity then to also look at, like, as you said, social media companies where we've partnered with a few to provide them intelligence that we're seeing from the threat that they combined with their areas of their chat rooms where there wasn't necessarily illegal activity going on in the chat room according
Hmm.
to their intelligence teams, but they could clearly see what they would call grooming of investors for future fraud activities, but the criminals are really good at getting into encrypted communications out of that. So as we're able to share information from our firms with these social media companies, they can connect the dots between what the threat ultimately will be in terms of criminal activity to the grooming, and they can actually stop there. And even in some instances, we've seen more global announcements warning their large scale membership of these social media platforms of what the frauds that they're seeing on this space, which is directly an impact of our sharing of intelligence. So we're thinking about the entire life cycle of fraud and cyber activity. On the cyber front, we've initiated a couple of tools that we're assisting member firms where we're aware of their key cyber vendors, and we're looking in a kind of a global environment of where we see potential risk coming to those third party and then sometimes fourth party vendors and feeding firms intelligence early before they see something related to either a threat specifically to them or just risks in the changing vendor landscape. And so we're hoping to be what we call left of boom, and that is on a timeline before something happens. So that would be the proactive space versus the reactive space, and that's also part is combining our relationships with what law enforcement or intelligence is seeing in the governmental space, as well as other private sector areas, and stuff that maybe firms are tracking already if you're one of the large firms, but if you're the either on the broker dealer subsidiary or you're a mid-size or small firm, hopefully it's a true value add that we're able to kind of highlight these particular areas so that you're aware of them and paying attention to them before something bad happens.
So that was good. So I mean, obviously you touched on some of like the three like general larger macro trends that you're seeing that that a lot of the attacks are occurring outside the industry. It used to be boiler rooms, now it's coming outside the industry, even outside the U.S. Third party risk, and then obviously the investment club schemes, where they're grooming it. Now, um, our markets obviously are constantly evolving, and we have like new products and new technology, new investor types. I mean, I don't think I'm not allowed to have a call if I don't mention like the effects of like artificial intelligence and 24-hour trading. So, uh, are those two areas that are you maybe talk a little about AI, 24-hour trading? Are you seeing anything unique in that in 24-hour trading that's getting your attention?
Yeah, and it's a fair question for you to ask, and I'd expect you to ask it
Yeah.
for your members.
Yeah.
Um, Back to that unique ability of an SRO, like we feel that we're in a position to move faster and pivot more easily
Hmm.
as a regulator in this space, and we also have that enterprise-wide view that no one else has. If we think about our ability to tie back into the broker-dealer side of the membership, as you noted, like we are the primary SRO in this space. Um, while we clearly see new products, new technology, new investor types is what makes this industry so great and what will make it resilient. It's an area where we do also look for what are the potential risks or in some cases potential threats that could be facing our investors, our members, and our markets. So. We looked at what technology can do, how it does it, how can we then kind of strengthen our expertise and knowledge around it, improve our regulatory programs, improve our market surveillance, and then how can member firms leverage what we
Yeah.
know to improve their compliance programs and risk areas in this space. So, uh, one of the areas that we have been looking at, and it's not just this year, but it's something we've set up over the past couple years, is with artificial intelligence initially, and then we pivoted to the generative AI. We brought in expertise from around our organization. So that is people within the kind of risk monitoring area. So those are people that are interfacing with firms, people within our exam area, people within our market surveillance area, but also within our own cybersecurity teams, our own compliance teams, our legal department, including our vendor relationship area, and then started to look at it from a holistic approach of, what do we see? And then we started reaching out to member firms, and we held a number of member firm working group and roundtables. So we want
Hmm.
to thank our member firms that participated in that, where they shared kind of their experiences, what their challenges were, and not just in a one-on-one capacity, but in a roundtable type discussion format, so that we could kind of really learn from everybody's perspective. So that starts to shape kind of what we're seeing and how that then drives what we report out. So we've talked a little bit about our annual regulatory oversight report that's on our website. It's out now. And there is a highlighted category around generative AI. And that grew from last year, which was an emerging technology call out box to its own section. And there we're trying to put together that actionable intelligence of what we're seeing. But at the same time, Jim, we're also seeing with what we kind of collect from our law enforcement counterparts, how criminals are leveraging the generative AI and causing us to think about how the industry must shift. So we issued a number of tips. Those are threat intelligence products directly to firms, and it's one that goes directly to firms because, frankly, the bad guys are watching what we publicly produce. So we've seen criminal
Hmm.
organizations, when we've warned firms, pivot the threat, and so with that, they're probably listening to this podcast as well. If it's public, they're paying attention to what we're doing, what we're advising, and what firms are doing to respond to this threat. And so we now have that channeled mechanism, and the FIFC that I talked about earlier will also expand on our ability to have more protected areas for us to share intelligence with firms. But when you think about the generative AI space, we can talk about how firms have been educating their call centers to do account and client verifications for decades. The ability for criminals now to leverage
Yeah.
generative AI to impersonate real clients and real individuals kind of throws that complexity kind of out or that kind of response and threat mitigation or risk mitigation controls firms have out the window. So we have to be thinking about how the adversary is going to use it versus who are our real clients and who the real investors are. And how do you balance that client protection and client verification with what the bad guys might be using? How do we think about and that, to that point, that gets right into account takeovers, which I know is
Yeah.
a subject near and dear to your heart. But then it gets into new account frauds. Then it
Yeah.
gets into pump and dump or ramp and
Yep.
dump schemes and market manipulation. So we really need to be kind of thinking about how not just we're going to be using it as FINRA in terms of generative AI, how firms are going to be using it. Firms are focused on like how regulators might be using it to examine them. We also have opened up another avenue of thinking about how that third party or that criminal actor might be attacking firms and clients using it. The I can go on and on in terms of like different types of generative AI use cases. Probably the best thing I can refer you to is we created a member firm use case, which it was, I think, a great example of FINRA Forward, where we were discussing the matters in a regulatory roundtable, and I realized quickly that different regulators were using different terms or nomenclature to describe different use cases, and we'd had about 9 use cases at that point. We quickly started, kind of talking to the additional regulators on how they were considering things. We then went out to our membership and saying, "How are you considering it?" So that 9 turned into 14, and that's what we published. Is the 14 different use types. And one, I thought it would be great for regulators to get on the same page, and we've shared it not only with the domestic U.S. Regulators and not just securities, but banking regulators as well, but also some international regulators. And in publishing this on my LinkedIn site, I'm not a influencer by any stretch of the imagination, but we've had over 51,000 views of this publication of the FINRA use cases or the member firm use cases by FINRA. And it's really just trying to kind of level set how we talk about it. And if it makes it easier for firms to talk to, as you said at the beginning of the call,
Yeah.
the myriad of regulators they have to deal with, that's a win. But we've heard from a couple of our member firms that they've actually used it internally to also create a standard set of discussions within their firm from a compliance mechanism to say, okay, if we're considering these 3 categories, they've been approved for kind of initial workup to potentially uh, bring those use cases at the firm. Um, these are certain areas we're not ready to go yet. So it also level sets and makes the cost of compliance easier internally on a firm. So those are some of the things that we're doing as this space rapidly evolves. On the 24/7 trading, something we started looking at in more depth last year, talking to firms, seeking input from firms of what they were seeing, what they wanted to do, what the demand might be, what their concerns were. And there's a myriad of concerns that kind of popped up, ranging from the desire to expand the opportunity to U.S. markets globally, as we have a kind of rotating time zone as part of the basic level of science and the Earth's rotation. But then it's getting into how do you actually feasibly do that? What are any areas around liquidity? And then are there any potential other risks that relate to potentially fraud or other things? So that range of things we've been looking at, reviewing, talking to firms, talking to exchanges, and watching how this is now shaping up into operations. And so I feel like we're poised to be able to deliver what we need to deliver when it's ready for us to take action.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously the sharing of information is so key here, even if it's just like an anecdotal type of an occurrence, get people thinking about it. Transparency is important. I know that I think there was obviously a hesitancy probably a decade ago, maybe, that for firms wanting to just not report if they had any type of an incident. I think that firms are getting more comfortable reporting this, realizing that this is going on across an entire industry, and it's they're not, maybe they're impacted today, and maybe one of their other competitors or colleagues are impacted tomorrow. So it is good to see that. I think people are getting more comfortable sharing, uh, you know, what they're seeing and what their experiences are. Just to wrap it up, I mean, obviously we've talked a lot. You've covered a lot of material here today, but what are some of the main takeaways and recommendations you just want people listening to the call to have walking away from this and kind of knowing, listen, you know our audience pretty well here. What are just some of the takeaways you'd like them to have from this?
Yeah, well, one, I want to thank the audience. Our risk monitoring analysts have done a number of, I'd say, shorter term engagements and outreaches to firms. And I would say, by and large, the firm's responses to our questions have been um,
Yeah,
uh, kind of resoundingly positive and quick. Uh, to your point, I think there was definitely a feeling over the past couple of years, and we've moved off it. But uh, why do you want to know, and what are you going to do with this? And am I going to see an exam or enforcement action because of what I tell you in this response? And as we've evolved over the past couple of years of collecting more intelligence and then providing that intelligence back, I think firms are slowly seeing as FINRA is approaching this unique positioning as a self-regulatory entity is it's beneficial for us to know what's going on in the industry. We're able to report that out to other government agencies, including the SEC and the U.S. Treasury Department. A lot of people will come to us asking us what do you see in the industry? What is the industry seeing? And even in new rules that are occurring outside of FINRA, we're getting questions about how are firms responding to that? What are firms' concerns? So we're really kind of that voice of the industry in a large number of areas, but then we're also able to kind of know what firms are doing in terms of their business model, as we've organized into firm groupings and not just a regional approach. And so that transformation has allowed us to see the industry differently in terms of a firm business model, and then there's submodels. So we can not just look at all retail firms, but we can see the difference between a fintech, self-directed, and then perhaps like a small firm retail business model, and then a, kind of provide a more bespoke approach to delivering that intelligence, and then getting into the point where we now know the vendor landscape for firms. We can
yeah,
start to see what directly impacts them. So gone are the days of us calling every firm to say, do you have this vendor or using this vendor? When you get a call from us, we know uh, what your risk impact potentially could be because we've already had the ability to get that information from you. So that has been super helpful for us. It provides us a unique perspective, and then as firms are seeing the payback of that from a number of our initiatives, I think we're more capable of fine-tuning our approach for the particular business models. And then that gets into that annual report. Our annual report is not necessarily a top-down priorities report, but it's really coming from the bottom up. We combine the confluence of what we have seen empirically, like through the 1,000+ exams we do every year, the 1,000+ investigations that we have ongoing, what our surveillance is seeing, combined with what we're pulling in, as we talked about already, from the myriad of intelligence coming from government and private sector, and then kind of looking forward of where we think that those risk and compliance issues are going to come full center the following year. And if we look back over the course of the last couple of years, we actually can tie back into what that 20, what our report at the beginning of the year uh, says is the areas we should be on the lookout for, uh, and what our exam program is looking at and seeing throughout the rest of that year. So I'd say one of the takeaways is really leverage that report
hmm
to make your firm, more positioned to address the risks and the threats that you're going to be seeing if you haven't already seen them. So that would be the one takeaway. The other one is the benefit of using that report on our website is we're able to see the areas of particular interest. And so as firms click on various subcategories, we're able to then help position ourselves to deliver more tools and products and intelligence related to the areas that they're interested in. So we talked a little bit about the cyber vendor tracking that we
Yeah.
initiated this year. Part of the justification was the fact that last year's report introduced vendor and third-party risk as a new category, and it quickly became the most clicked on category over our previous leaders that were specifically around the financial crime space. And so with that, we can actually deliver more products to firms. So we're using that really full circle in terms of an indication of interest and need from our firms. And I don't think anyone else out there is doing something to that level. And we'll continue to do that because we want to support our membership because we think that they can really move fast to protect investors and markets as they align with what we're seeing.
Well, that's great. Well, I hope my hopeful takeaway here is that people maybe they realize that maybe while the bad guys are getting better or getting more in their craft, but the good guys are also getting better as well. All right, so I do know that a lot of firms that are are members. I've seen what they're able to kind of do in this space, and it's very impressive as far as monitoring activity within their firm, and then obviously information that's publicly available for recognizing maybe potential spoofing before even the regulator comes to them. So there is some degree of confidence here, but obviously there's a lot of work to get done and a lot of information sharing that needs to be done in this area. So, Greg, I want to thank you for coming on late in the year here. I know you probably would rather be out holiday shopping and getting ready for the new year, but obviously with the report coming out recently, I thought it would be a great first to get on the call and talk about it. And with that, I just want to thank you again. I want to wish everybody a successful 2026. This will be the last open call that we have for this year, and we look forward to to having more in the years to come. Thank you very much. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.